Francesco Mambrini. You can see I'm feeling a little cold. So wearing my jacket and hiding my name. I work for the German Archaeological Institute, and I am here to present the work that a fairly large group of partners have been conducting in the context of a project called EAGLE. That efforts that I think are interested here in this context because they go in two directions, I would say, to summarize. On the one hand, we are trying to provide more data, the access to more data on specific cultural artifacts, and also more information, more meaningful information and more connections to their context, these cultural artifacts. And on the other hand, we are also trying to build infrastructure to encourage our audience, people that are looking into this data, to foster multidisciplinary, multi-level approaches to this content. The content I'm talking about, the cultural artifacts that we are dealing with, are inscriptions written in Greek and Latin from the Greco-Roman world throughout their history. And to tell you a little more about EAGLE. EAGLE is a project that was financed by the European Commission under their Information Technology Support Program, which I don't remember exactly the name of. And it's an acronym that stands for Europeana Network of Ancient Greek and Latin Epigraphy. It's a project that it's connecting a large group of partners and partner institutions. And this is the starting list, the list that we started with, but numbers of members of the consortium right now has increased over time. By the way, we just celebrated our first anniversary. I mean, we are just entered into year 2 of the project. And of course, being such a big European project, we celebrated this with a lot of paperwork. And anyway, memorandum of agreements with other projects are on the way, and so we are particularly proud that we are taking a large group of participants together for this work. In raw number, our objectives are listed here. We are going to collect 1.5 million items, inscriptions, pictures, images, books, and inscribed monuments that are somehow important to contextualize and to get the audience access to inscriptions from the Greco-Roman world. It's going to be the biggest collection, and we were going to provide the point of entry to the biggest collection of inscribed objects from the antiquity. Objects that are currently scattered to 25 countries, not only European countries, as it's written here, but also countries from all the Mediterranean world, and the words of the Roman Empire, the different provinces of the Roman Empire. We are going also to provide some user-dedicated services, a mobile application for the identification inscription. I'm going to tell you more about it later, and a storytelling application. And also this is going to involve a lot of harmonization of content, including, of course, geographical data. We are talking about a little more. I'm afraid I've got an older version of my slides anyway. But when we talk about inscription, I wanted to show you a nice inscribed monument, basically an inscribed slab of stone. One corner of which was missing, and this was going to tell you that this was meant to tell you that when we talk about inscriptions, we really are talking about complex cultural artifacts. The text of this inscription, if we were to of one inscription, one single inscription that we can take as an example, if we were to read every single letter in it, would not probably make sense to any of us, but the most trained specialists. Because not only it would be written in Greek or Latin, and you had to know the language, but also it has survived through a complex history that would probably might have damaged the text. And part of the text would not be easy to read, and would take specialists to guess what is, how to fill the gaps that are in the text that we can read with our eyes right now on the monuments. But also, and I would say probably more important, these inscriptions were part of a complex world of cultural landscapes they could make reference to, and they were of course a part of. And they could make reference to this landscape, to this world, by taking for granted many things that are not granted anymore for us. They could mention persons, institutions, places in the landscape and in the environments that was surrounding the inscriptions that would perhaps be very difficult for us to interpret, or it would take some specialists to most of these names or most of these institutions would be mentioned in the text by abbreviations that would not make sense unless you know how to decode them, and whereas probably the intended audience of this inscription knew how to decode them, maybe we don't, or just the specialists among us can. So what we are providing, what we are collecting in the Eagle project are edited versions of these inscriptions. Editions where specialists have already provided some access to the non-specialist to most of these difficult parts. So in one edition of an inscription, either printed or digital, you would most likely see, not that you would see side by side with the text as it is transmitted, the chromatic transcription, and also an edited text where these abbreviations and acronyms are spelled in full, and so on. If we talk about one specific aspect of this context and the relation between geography and the collection of epigraphic materials of inscription, and how the geographical context is important to classify and bring together an editing inscription, we have to perhaps go back to the early days of modern contemporary epigraphy, science of inscriptions. And early days that are represented here in these slides by two of the most recognized, most glorious fathers of the discipline. This gentleman here is August Berg, who was the editor of the Corpus Inscriptionum Graecarum, whose first volume was published in 1825. And when he undertook the task of editing complete corpus of the inscriptions that were known to his time, written in Greek, he did not follow the usual practice these days to compile a collection of thematic inscriptions, dedicator inscriptions, funerary inscriptions, and so on. But he chose instead to organize his collection with geographic criteria, collecting together the inscriptions that were coming from the same area. The task evolved, and the Corpus Inscriptionum Graecarum evolved into what is nowadays the Inscriptiones Graecae. But the same idea was taken up by Theodor Mommsen, picture on your right, who was the editor of the corresponding Latin corpus. The Corpus Inscriptionum Latinarum, whose first volume was published in something like 20 years later, 1847, if I remember correctly. The other end of the spectrum, the work still continues. This map over here shows the different volumes, the divisions of the inscriptions, the geographic areas in the volumes of the Corpus Inscriptionum Latinarum nowadays. But with epigraphy going digital on the other hand, I would like to draw the attention to this other map. The Eagle project nowadays is building on the experience of another previous network of inscriptions that was also called Eagle, which used to stand for Electronic Archive of Greek and Roman, power of a well-chosen accurate, of course. And this early consortium included 4 of the databases that are represented in the Eagle project, so the current Eagle project. There were the Heidelberg, the epigraphic database, the EDR, the epigraphic database of Rome, and the epigraphic database of Bari, and the Hispania online, epigraphic Hispania online. And they decided also to somehow split the content was going to be included in their collection on geographic terms. By the way, you see in these pictures the representation of this division. And you see in these pictures borders and divisions whose artificial nature were discussed this morning. These borders are not the borders of the modern states, but they are the borders of the Roman administrative units, and especially the provinces, which are no less artificial than modern for this material, because of course they somehow froze the representation into a specific time of the organization of the Roman Empire, which may or may not correspond to the data of such a chronologically vast and diverse collection of epigraphic material. But somehow this kind of simplification must be done. You see a lot of gaps in these maps, this representation of the Roman Empire. And filling this gap is one of the tasks in the current Eagle project. How is it done? The collection builds, of course, on the experience of the early Eagle network, but then we are including more and more content providers right now. Some of them are local projects that deal with specific areas, specific geographic areas, like the Gallia with the Patron collection, or the Ubi Lupa, located in Salzburg, that is collecting inscriptions from specific areas. I should have mentioned probably also Cyprus. Over there, it's with the institute. Cyprus is a partner of the Eagle project. It's contributing inscription from Cyprus. So the way we are filling this, one of the ways we are filling these gaps in the maps is including more specific projects that deal with collections, with local collections. But this is not the only way. This pictures is complicated by the fact that we are integrating also collections that are built with different criteria. And probably we have to skip a bit. Oh yeah, over here you can see this the image I was mentioning before of one inscription. So all this makes for a complicated series of complicated problems in content matching, because for one thing, I have mentioned space context, but we all know that space terminology can mean a lot of things according to different definitions of what we define as space. And this is the situation that we find in our content providers. We have difference of granularity, for example, difference of the kind of information that is recorded. Some of our content providers, for example, record only the place where the inscriptions were found. Some others, also the place where the inscriptions are stored right now, and the collection of museums where these inscriptions are found right now. Some of our content providers are, in terms of granularity of our information, some mention just the city or the ancient city where the ancient settlement where an inscription was found, or the place that the inscription was found in terms of the ancient settlement it corresponds to. Some other has more granular information, like for example the epigraphic database of Bari, which consists mostly of Christian inscriptions from the city of Rome, has a very detailed and precise mapping of every catacombs, the city of Rome, and a very detailed position of every inscription within each of these catacombs. Some other content providers, like for example us, the Deutsches Archäologisches Institut, or Heidelberg, are either building, like Heidelberg, or they already have, like we have, complete gazetteer with unique identifiers for the different space mentioned in the different levels of granularity, and relations between the space, if one location is a part of another. One thing that we definitely, okay, so this situation, this diverse situation, of course, makes for a lot of work in content harmonization. Where do we stand right now, just to make it everything very brief? What we are trying to do is, of course, to match all the different toponyms that we find in our content provider to at least one unique identifier for each location, at the different, we chose also to take the broadest definition of space terminology that we could find. So we include every reference to the Roman provinces, to the regions, and to the cities and to the land ancient settings. And what we are trying to do, well, one of our partners, the University of Birmingham, is helping us to do, is to provide all these different toponyms, associate all these different toponyms to one single unique identifier that will be used throughout the collection. So this linking of data will be conducted by using a unique identifier provided by the Trismegistos initiative. Of course, linking data with, in terms of different space terminology is very helpful, because it will allow you also, if you export your data, if you make your data available to networks that connect all the objects in different collections that share the same identifiers, to make sense of your geographical context, meaning to retrieve materials from different collections, different objects that make reference to have reference to the same geographic location. This is what Heidelberg, for example, one of our content providers, one major content provider, does by using via the one such network, probably most important, which is the Pelagius network. And this is where we want to, in the end, we want to go. This is the direction that we want to take. Of course, this means that part of our work would be, just to make it very brief, to align our own unique identifiers to these to the gazetteers that are used by other projects. And this is what has been going on with an agreement between Eagle and Pelagius Tree project. Our Trismegistos unique identifiers will be aligned with the Pleiades identifier by Wikidata, and this is some sort of is a diagram of the workflow that this is taking. I'm afraid I won't have the time to explain you how this is going to be integrated, not only in a portal that we give access to these collections of materials and linking and linked data, but also through other services like a storytelling application, which in very, very, very broad terms will be an editing platform. We imagine this as an editing, as a text editing platform that will allow people also to search and include by drag and dropping. This is an example of a model platform that we took, which is Storyfy, storytelling application. To look in different, to take and include into your stories content from different collections that deal with the ancient world, like Versus Project or Wikipedia, of course, Pelagius, and our own collections in Europeana. Just to conclude, this is a list of the next coming milestones. So 375,000 items will be made available by September to Europeana, and first release of the mobile application, the storytelling application, will be by December.